Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to another episode with Raf King and Mr. Tango here. Yeah, so today we're talking about cranial sacral therapy. Now, cranial sacral therapy isn't as popular as a lot of other styles of massage out there, and it is a little more obscure and abstract in certain ways, and it doesn't look like a lot of other styles of massage. You know, when you kind of think about Russian, injury sports, trigger point, Swedish, like those all kind of have a lot of overlapping qualities about them. But cranial sacral, this falls more into the light touch modalities. So that in another way, people don't gravitate towards it as much because although light touch can have a tremendous impact, when you're not very savvy with the art of massage, it's very easy to think that less pressure means less work and more pressure means more work, right? I mean, we run into this all the time where people want to be tortured on the table because they think they're getting more out of it. And there are studies out there that show that that's not necessarily the case, that there is a perfect pressure for everybody and that you want to be on that pressure more so. But in my practice, yeah, sometimes you absolutely need to just lay down the pressure when it comes to a treatment. Absolutely 100% think that. But there are some misconceptions out there. The point that I'm trying to make, though, is with cranial sacral here, it's easy for people to overlook it and to not really care about it because a lot of it does revolve around light touch. There are heavier styles of it out there, but for the most part, when people study cranial sacral therapy, light touch. And what I mean by light touch is think about the weight of a nickel. That's how much pressure you're providing for a treatment here. Now, knowing that, it's easy to look at it and say, why would anybody pay money for that? Right? Like, well, what could possibly be the the positive attributes to something like that, right? Well, let's go ahead and get into it. William Sutherland in the 1800s was the guy to discover the cranial rhythm. Now, this cranial rhythm basically states that the bones of your skull, and just as you're aware that these are all individual bones, but they're held together like puzzle pieces around the head, right? So I have a bunch of individual bones that they don't appear to move because of the type of joints that they have, right? Some joints don't necessarily move very much. Really, all a joint is two bones articulating, right? It doesn't necessarily imply that there's a huge amount of range of motion like you would have in the shoulder. But he, and later on John Upledger in the 1970s, was able to show that there is movement to the bones of the skull. Now, it's a very small movement, right? Like, you're not going to be able to look at somebody and be like, damn, like, that is some cranial rhythm. Like, no, it's half the width of a piece of paper. Excuse me, half the thickness of a piece of paper, right? So it's a very, very minute movement. It's a very small movement. And actually how they came up with these claims here is two things. They injected dye into the sutures of the skull, showing that there was collagen in these sutures here, suggesting that there could be movement, right? And later what they also did was they put these probes on a monkey's skull. And these probes were basically had radio waves in between, so they'd be able to judge distance very well. And they noticed that there was a small change in distance between these probes, showing that yes, there was a cranial rhythm, that there was movement in the skull. And this happens anywhere from 6 to 14 times a minute. I believe that the theory currently is that it happens across all mammals, that all mammals have something like this. Now, they don't know exactly why it's happening. There's some speculation as to it is part of our evolution, it's an energetic thing, it's a special nerve in the sutures that's causing it, but they're not entirely sure. But what they do know is that there is movement there. Now based on that movement, you can help to assess what's going on with a person. If I have more expansion on one side of the head than the other, it's not equal, then I should try to equalize that. Because when we have compression around the head here, and most of cranial work is around the head, and you can get that from the name, right? But don't let me mislead you. Cranial sacral work can obviously include the cranium and the sacrum, but all the tissue in between. Cranial sacral work really is a soft approach to connective tissue work, right? So you remember when we talked about structural integration and how that was the bomb diggity when it came to restructuring your connective tissue. Well, this is the other side of it, basically. We're trying to do the same thing by lengthening connective tissue and having an effect on our emotions and our mental health as well. We're just not doing it with a lot of pressure. We're doing it with very, very soft pressure. Now, again, oftentimes with that soft pressure, it's easy for people to say, like, it can't work. But there's no way that this is doing anything at all. But let's go ahead and get into that a little bit. So, like I mentioned before, most of the work hangs out around the head. And when you have compression, when one bone doesn't want to move and is compressing that part of the head, you're going to get certain symptoms, certain characteristics from that part of the brain, right? So if you were to think about how the frontal lobe right here is oftentimes responsible for our higher perception and our problem solving and our higher thought. If someone's feeling very cloudy and they don't have a lot of focus, they're feeling very foggy headed, right? They can't quite grasp planning something for the future, then working the frontal bone right here can have a positive effect on the frontal cortex, right? And it's when cranial sacral is taught, oftentimes we give these bones characteristics, but it's the part of the brain underneath the bone that really is relaying these characteristics, right? An example that I like to give. So I actually did a small experiment with my brother. He's got some pretty extreme ADHD. He's had it his whole life. For a while he was medicated, then he didn't want to be medicated, and I love the guy so much. I really do, and he tries so hard. So I wanted to see what kind of effect our cranial work would have with him. And so we got him on the table, and a big part of that is the frontal bone right here that you're going to be working, and of course the other bones of the skull as well. Oh, what you doing, buddy? What you doing? But the frontal bone being the big one to work. Now, as you do this work, it's very patient work. Like I mentioned before, it's light touch, and it's not like with a typical massage stroke, like with Swedish massage or something, where you do a stroke and there's one repetition, right? You might do a few of those, maybe do 10 of them if you're going crazy, right? With this, you're holding and you're encouraging one particular movement, right? So let's take the frontal bone since we're already talking about it. So it's this bone, your forehead basically. And basically what I would do is I would hook in to this part of the frontal bone. Yeah, you trying to get a good peek there, buddy? And I want to encourage that bone forward, right? Anteriorly. And each bone is going to have a set movement that you want to try to perform for it. So it takes out a lot of the guesswork there. But I'm trying to encourage this way, anteriorly, forward. I'm trying to decompress that part of the head there. So with 5 grams of pressure, I'm hooking into this part of the frontal bone and pushing it anteriorly. And I'm going to hold it there for anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes. Very patient work can have a profound, absolutely profound impact. And you wouldn't think so. Like, I can be a very black and white type of guy, so when I first heard about cranial sacral work, I was like, this is total BS, and I can't believe that my time is being wasted on this. But when I came around to experimenting with my brother, our first session, he got off the table and was like, my head doesn't really feel like a part of me right now, and I feel calm, and I feel like I can think, and it was really moving to see, because he's somebody who definitely struggles with focus, and it's not like I've always gotten so irritated because a lot of people make it sound like it's his choice to not focus, right? Like he's choosing to kind of just slack off and be lazy, but it's very frustrating to him that he can't just tune in like everybody else. So when I found out that cranial sacral work had this kind of impact on him, like I was a total believer after that. Like, absolutely. Now, does it do everything that cranial sacral therapists claim it can do? I mean, probably not, right? I mean, I think plenty of branches of holistic health fall into that pattern where they're trying to push home how important it can be to get that therapy, and they end up making kind of profound claims that they don't really need to, it's kind of trying at, right? So I don't know about all of the claims of cranial sacral therapy and how true they are, but I do know for myself and working with somebody with ADHD that it was a very positive thing to do. Not only that, but let's say you're somebody out there who you've been massaging for a while, maybe you haven't been massaging for a while, and your joints already hurt. You're already just not, you can't apply as much pressure as you want to the body. You maybe want some kind of alternative. Cranial sacral work is nicknamed the lazy man's massage, right? Because it's very light, it's very patient. There's not a lot of pressure you're putting on your joints. For the techniques that do take a lot of pressure, you're using their body weight, right? So you might have your hand underneath the body, and it's their weight that's creating the pressure. You're not pushing up into the body. Their gravity's doing all the work essentially for you. So that can be a really positive thing for if you still want to help people via body work, but you can't do it the same way that you were doing it before. Now, some of the pitfalls I think about when I think about cranial sacral, and we've already gone over a couple of them, like just some of the extreme claims that can be out there, or just the approach doesn't look like other approaches, so it automatically doesn't seem to have as much validity. But another thing that I wish would be done differently when teaching cranial sacral work, and who knows, this actually might be done at the actual institute, right? Because there is an Upledger Institute where they get pretty hardcore about this, so they might do it there. I haven't been able to visit there. I'm talking strictly from my education, which was kind of you spend 5 to 10 weeks on one topic and you move to something else, so it's more of an intro to everything. But the cranial sacral rhythm, it's kind of a hard thing to palpate for, right? Like half the thickness of a piece of paper. Like I'm good at palpation, but that in and of itself might be hard to feel, especially when you have pulse and breathing and gurgling stomach, like just all sorts of other things going on in the body. And what I commonly hear when it comes to cranial sacral studies is that you might have 6 to 10 different therapists doing cranial sacral work, but they're all reporting something different. And that's not good news, because that means that, everybody involved is either different levels of skilled, or they're all BSing, right? The point that I'm trying to make, though, is I wish there were more clear-cut ways we knew if we were doing the work right or not. I mean, even the guy who taught me was like, I don't actually know if I'm doing anything. What I do know is that I'm doing the techniques correctly. And that's what we focused on. And through doing techniques correctly, we found that we could get effects within our client. But what I wish would happen is, kind of coming back to the beginning of our presentation, when we were talking about Upledger putting probes on the head to judge the distance, the change in distance, as he was showing the cranial rhythm, I wish we were able to do that with people during school, right? I wish I could put probes on somebody's head, I could hold their head, and I could see and feel the cranial rhythm. Like, I wish I could put more of my nervous system into the process so I could truly understand it. Because what I think happens is, I think we think we feel it. I think we try really hard. And I'm not saying everybody out there is totally BSing it, but what I think can happen is we misread certain movement in the body, certain tissues in the body, which kind of leads to like a false confidence in a way. So I wish there was more emphasis put on that. I wish there was more emphasis put on how to market with something like this. Like, no one ever told me getting in with a bunch of dentists was going to be the key to having a successful cranial sacral practice. Like, nobody mentioned that. I just stumbled upon it. And when you are already dealing with a modality that is kind of strange, and then you're not told how to market it, it's so easy for it to fall by the wayside. I mean, I look around in the Prescott area here, and I don't really see any prominent cranial sacral therapists. That's all they focus on. They're mostly like guys like me who have had some cool training in it, but don't necessarily focus on it. They can do it, but that's not really going to stand up to somebody who like practices it full time. I do encourage you to try getting a cranial sacral session, because it can be pretty phenomenal. Just light touch in and of itself is seen as like maybe a ripoff from normal massage, because you're not getting that extra pressure with it. But the way your nervous system can react to something light to something non-invasive, like extremely non-invasive, can be so rewarding. It could be so cool. And I don't know, give it a shot. And this, I should also add, this is another modality that you stay fully clothed for. You're not going to get disrobed. You're just going to lay on somebody's table. They're going to palpate through the body. They're going to feel around the head a little bit. And you might not even know where they're at for a while. I've noticed with light touch that it's very easy for the body to kind of have that effect where it thinks you're still there type of thing. So it could feel like you've got multiple hands throughout the body. It's a very nurturing experience. If you have any other questions about cranial sacral, though, feel free to reach out. If you want to book a massage, you can go ahead and do so at this website here. Of course, I encourage you to check out my book. It's got all sorts of fun stuff in there. In fact, the story that I told you about my brother is in there. And thank you so much for hanging out today. I super appreciate all of you. I really hope that you're having a great day. See you in the next video.